I'm joined now by the Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, and Shadow Treasurer, Angus Taylor. Welcome to both of you.
Thanks, Sarah and Angus.
Now, both sides of politics have been criticised. We saw plenty of it in Laura's package there for the election campaign spendathon, as it's been called, including an extra, we counted, $23.6 billion at the weekend from both sides. Now, this is happening when the budget is headed into deficit. So starting with you, the accumulated deficit over the next 4 years is $179 billion. I hope everyone at home heard that clearly. Have you added to that since the budget with your campaign promises?
In a very responsible and limited way.
So yes,
but what that analysis ignores is that our government has engineered the biggest ever single-term improvement in a budget in our history, more than $200 billion improvement in the budget. This year's debt is $177 billion lower, saving Australians on debt interest. We've banked most of the upward revisions to revenue. We've found $95 billion in savings. And the reasons that's important, not just because we've delivered those two surpluses, we've halved the deficit this year, but because we've made room to help people with the cost of living and to invest in making our economy more resilient.
So, Angus, let me just come to you, because you've matched the government on a great deal of its spending, and this weekend you've added $1.5 billion, as we just heard, for first home buyers to offset mortgage interest payments, a $10 billion one-off tax rebate, and that's on top of your already existing fuel excise cut. What savings are you offering to balance this spending?
Thank you, Sarah, and it's great to be with you. Can I just challenge some of what we just heard from Jim? The deficit has gone up substantially over the last 12 months. Labor inherited monthly surpluses after we came out of COVID, and the truth of the matter is that they've taken the budget off a cliff. Now, we've opposed over $100 billion of Labor spending since Labor came to power. A whole range of initiatives that we think are not appropriate at this time, and we will deliver a stronger budget bottom line than Labor's.
Have you taken the budget off a cliff?
Of course not. I mean, what Angus just said then, respectfully, was rubbish. And you can look in the budget papers. You compare the pre-election outlook from the election in 2022 to the progress that we've made together as Australians ever since then, and the budget is substantially stronger. And the reason that's so important is because this is an uncertain world. And our efforts to help people with the cost of living and strengthen incomes, make our economy more resilient, they couldn't be more important. There's always a premium on responsible and stable economic management, but particularly now, and the alternative is a coalition of cuts and chaos, which will make Australians worse off and make Australia more vulnerable at a time when there's all this volatility in the global economy.
Sarah, Jim threw out the budget rule book when he first came into the job. Households, small businesses, big businesses all tend to have budget rules that they stick to. Jim threw them out. And the result of that is we're heading towards $1.2 trillion of debt, $125,000 of debt and interest payments in the budget over the next couple of years for the average Australian household.
So
this is why we've opposed over $100 billion.
All right, you said that already. So let's go to what you're doing. So Peter Dutton promised at the budget, and in his budget reply, on this program, no more tax cuts, because he said the budget can't afford it, which seems to line up with what you just said. But let's just hear Peter Dutton saying that just a few weeks ago.
I'd love to introduce tax reform and tax cuts, but the Labor Party has racked up what we now see in the budget papers of about $1.2 trillion of debt. So we have to be realistic and understand the constraints that we've got.
And to be clear, so that's an absolute no for the campaign?
We have a great desire at some stage when we clean up Labor's mess, but we won't be able to provide tax cuts during this campaign.
You heard what the leader said there. You've announced a large one-off tax refund for 10 million Australians. What happened to the discipline of the budget can't afford it?
Well, that discussion was about personal income tax reforms.
Do you think that's how the public hears it when they say there will be no tax cuts during the campaign?
Well, when you show a grab like that, the public will hear it as it's shown.
Well, the question is, will there be tax cuts? And you're offering a very large tax refund.
If I may,
please.
What we need is short-term cost of living relief for Australians, which is temporary, which is meaningful, and which is going to make a difference for rebuilding the household buffers, which have gone backwards badly under Labor. The biggest hit to our standard of living in our history, worse than any of our peer countries around the world. We also need to rebuild the government budget, which, as I have just said, has gone off a cliff under Jim Chalmers because basically they threw out the rule book. Now, we do that by re-establishing the fiscal rules, making sure we grow the economy faster than spending, making sure wasteful spending is not committed to $100 billion under Labor that we've said is not appropriate. And we can get ourselves into a position where those longer-term tax reforms can be achieved. In the short term, we do need to make sure that household buffers are rebuilt. That's why we're offering the $1,200 tax offset. It's also why we're offering 25 cents a litre off the fuel.
There's an important point to be made about this, Sarah. What Angus and Peter Dutton are offering is no ongoing help with the cost of living. He's just admitted that. And this is a really key difference in the election. The thing that Angus hasn't told your viewers is that his policy is to legislate higher income taxes permanently on the Australian people. And so the difference here in the election, immediate and ongoing help with the cost of living, higher wages and lower taxes under Labor, lower wages and higher taxes, and secret cuts to pay for nuclear reactors.
Hold on with your
election.
secret cuts, because that does come rather into the slogan territory that I asked you both to avoid if you could. But just to stay with you, because you're talking about essentially sugar hits and short-term help with this tax relief. But your top-up tax cuts that you announced at the election, they're going to be wiped out by bracket creep in a couple of years, so they're temporary too. Well,
that's a strange way to put it, Sarah, because we are returning bracket creep and Angus will be taking it back. That's the difference.
Talk about what you're offering.
Yeah, we're offering to return.
In 2 years' time, that will be gone, won't it? That will be smothered by bracket creep.
The point that I'm making, Sarah, is one of the motivations for our top-up tax cuts. 3 rounds of tax cuts under us. Average benefit of about $50 a week. That's about returning bracket creep to every Australian taxpayer, recognising that bracket creep's an issue in our economy. Now, only one party is going to the election with a policy of permanent income tax cuts. The other one is going to the election with a policy of permanent income tax hikes.
All right, let's go. I'm going to have to move.
If I may, just briefly, Sarah, already we've seen personal income tax increases of $3,500 per person in Australia under Labor. Their own plan is to take that up to $6,000 over the next couple of years. That's personal income tax increases. That's what we've seen under Labor. That is their plan. All
right, let's move on to housing policy, because obviously we heard big announcements from both sides at the weekend for dealing with the crisis that's facing home buyers in all over Australia. $10 billion for 100,000 homes. I think the timescale provided was over 8 years. Mm-hmm. Was that money in the budget?
That was not, but this is $2 billion in grants and $8 billion in loans.
So that's an extra $10 billion on top of your...
No, well, in the forward estimates, it's about $600 million.
Okay.
And that's because it's an 8-year program. It's a combination of grants and loans, working closely with the state governments. And again, an important difference. Under Labor, there will be more homes and smaller deposits. Under Angus and the Liberals, there will be fewer homes and higher house prices. And that's why Saul Estlake and others have been so sharply critical of what the Coalition proposed yesterday, because they're proposing to cut the Housing Australia Future Fund. That will mean fewer homes in our economy when we desperately need more. You haven't built a home with it, Jim.
I think they've been critical of both policies, suggesting that both policies will juice up demand. But just to stay with that...
what Saul acknowledged was that we are building more homes than the Coalition, and supply is the primary
Just to
issue.
stay with that question for a moment, you say it's an 8-year program. Is there any guarantee on when those houses will be built, to go to Angus's point?
Well, first of all, it's not the only thing we're doing to build more homes. No. $43 billion program, and so that's important. It's not the first foray into building more homes. We've got a very broad, very ambitious agenda. What we've said about these homes is they'll start to be built next year and completed the year after. But again, there's already tens of thousands of homes in the pipeline from our policies. What we've seen since we've come to office is construction costs have come down compared to under the Coalition. New approvals have turned around. Investment growth in housing and new builds, all of that is improving. But we know that we need to go further and faster, and that's why we made the additional announcement we did yesterday.
Angus, can I just go to your policy? Obviously, there's been a great deal of criticism of it today from analysts, from economists, from former Reserve Bank governor. But just a particular question about it, isn't it going to create 2 classes of those very pressured first home buyers, those who bought before this tax deduction was offered and those who didn't? How do you explain to someone who bought a house last week that they're not eligible, or would you consider backdating it?
Well, can I say, Sarah, that the starting point here is that we want to restore home ownership as part of the Australian dream, and the Liberal Party has always stood for home ownership. Under Labor, they targeted 1.2 million houses. The experts tell us that we'll be lucky to get to 800,000, and not a single house has been completed or is being lived in under Labor's programs.
Well, can you just respond to that? Because that's a criticism you make all the time.
Not a single house has been completed.
Well, two things about that very briefly. First of all, it's not true. Secondly, they held up in the Senate, build to rent, help to buy, the Housing Australia Future Fund.
Point.
Jim,
you don't get to oppose everything in the Senate.
If I may, is a single person living in one of these houses from this program?
We've built a couple of thousand.
Has a single person actually moved into one of these houses?
We've built a couple of thousand houses. There's 28,000 more in the
haven't answered
pipeline
the
right
question.
now, and there'll be fewer
Let me answer
under
the
your
question.
proposal because you want to cut the Housing Australia Future Fund.
So
that
the
would
truth
mean
is,
fewer homes.
not a single person is living in one of these houses. Now, what we need is a package of reforms that covers both supply side and affordability. On the supply side, we need to bust the infrastructure bottlenecks, if I may, Jim. We need to bust the infrastructure bottlenecks, and that's why there's a $5 billion fund to get 500,000 houses moving in the marketplace. Interest tax deductibility for new homes is both a supply measure and an affordability measure.
It's a measure that's been rejected by your side of politics for many, many years. Why is it suddenly a good idea?
Because we've got a crisis in this country. We have a crisis where young Australians can't get into a home.
I think there was already a crisis building when Peter Costello said he didn't like it because it mixed housing policy with tax policy.
We've never seen, in my lifetime, seen a crisis like we have right now. And I think Australians, when I get around the country, I hear it all the time in my own electorate where I see houses are held up and not being completed. So interest tax deductibility will provide that conduit, not just for affordability for young Australians wanting to get into a home, but also to make sure that new builds are actually occurring. There's a customer for a builder or developer at the end of the pipeline when they complete that development. That's alongside
fact here.
All right.
When we came to office, approvals were falling almost 22%. Now they're growing by 16%. We are turning things around. You can't build 1.2 million homes overnight, but we're building more homes than what our political opponents would do because they're cutting funding to housing, including abolishing the Housing Australia Future Fund, which is about more affordable homes for more people.
Do you have any replacement for, you said that you are, it was announced at the budget and reply that you would abolish the Housing Australia Future Fund. Do you have any replacement for social and affordable housing, which we know is in crisis in Australia?
We need all housing increased in supply,
that particular
Sarah,
type of housing?
There's billions of dollars that goes to the states for social housing now, and we will support that. But let's be clear.
So there is no specific policy to replace the building of social
There is already money
housing.
that goes to the state governments for social housing, as Jim knows. Now, the crucial point here is that you need a mix of measures. Interest tax deductibility for first home buyers, infrastructure which is holding up thousands of houses in my own electorate, people who have bought blocks of land that are not being built, making sure that we get the balance right on immigration, which has made it too hard to get a home in recent times, and also making sure we fix the construction industry. A CFMEU with deep links to the criminal underworld will be deregistered. It's making it hard to build infrastructure and build homes, and also providing people with access to their superannuation. It'll have to be reinvested back into their superannuation to get into a home and to pay a deposit. So all of these measures, affordability, supply, we're conscious of both, and getting outcomes.
Do you accept the criticism made in Laura's package from a number of those analysts who have also spoken out today that what your policy will do is juice up demand at a time when supply is the key focus?
What they miss is that the policy we announced yesterday was for new homes, and this is the key. We've deliberately not done it for existing homes because we need a pipeline of new homes being built. Developers and builders need to know that there's a market for their homes once they're built, and having first home buyers as that market is good for first home buyers and good for supply.
Treasurer, if I could just come back to you, your policy for allowing home buyers to get first home buyers to get a home loan with only a 5% deposit, no limit now on household income and no limit on the number of applicants. Do you have any modelling on how many new home buyers will be enabled by this policy?
We think about 80,000 a year, and there's a very, very small budget cost, effectively an administration cost, because what we know from the existing scheme is there are very, very few defaults. And so this is a very responsible way to get deposits down at the same time as we build more homes. I think that is the difference, respectfully, Angus. I mean, Angus and the Coalition are trying to build fewer homes by abolishing the Housing Australia Future Fund. All of our policies work hand in hand to build more homes, to get those deposits down. Those are the two main obstacles that first home buyers face: supply and the size of the deposit, and that's why those two things were announced.
Can I just ask you both a question? It always strikes me when we're having a debate about housing. I understand this is a political campaign. Would Australia be better off if the two of you could get together on this subject, that this should be a subject where partisanship is set aside and genuine solutions are found?
Well, I'd love to see that, Sarah, because I think home ownership has become such a crisis for young Australians. I'm the father of 4 kids at that sort of age.
I don't hear you offering to work with Jim
I mean,
Chalmers.
I am more than happy to work with Labor on the policies that I've just outlined. And we need a solution to this, because if we don't get it, it will not be the Australia I was lucky enough to grow up in.
True. All right. I want to move on to energy, one of the other central issues of this campaign. Just a quick one, Angus Taylor. You persuaded the Cabinet to support the net zero target of 2050. Do you still support that target?
Of course. Of course. And now the debate is about how to get there in a way which ensures we have affordable, reliable power for all Australians, for industry, for small businesses and for households. And under Labor, they were promised a reduction in their electricity prices, $275, and they've seen the exact opposite, with sharp increases.
Let's talk about nuclear, because it's something that hasn't been talked about much in this campaign. The idea of taxpayers putting up hundreds of billions of dollars, whatever that figure is, to build 7 nuclear power plants in Australia. It sounds like central planning much more appropriate to Beijing's command economy than Australia. How do you explain this one to traditional Liberals?
Well, let's be clear. This is a pathway to 2050, which will reduce emissions, of course, because nuclear generators have zero emissions.
Question.
Well, I will. Yep. I'll come to that. Which will be 44% cheaper than Labor's pathway. And that, well, it's true, Jim. And independent modelling has said that. And Labor is lying about costings in their ads.
It's just rubbish.
They're simply, well, Jim, you get to speak.
It's not worth
I will as well. And we know by building 7 2-gigawatt baseload generators, which will deliver a return to shareholders, which will be the taxpayers, they'll deliver a return, and that's how they're paid for. Now, Labor...
So hold on, just on that topic, does that mean that you have private companies ready to invest in nuclear power in Australia?
I'm saying taxpayers will get a return on their investment, and this is the point.
Investors won't go near it.
Well, hang on.
They won't go near it.
Well, I tell you what, investors are not going near your plan.
Well,
You're having to underwrite it with your capacity investment scheme.
Let's just stay with nuclear for the moment, because this is the one we haven't got to talk about much. So why won't, if Jim Chalmers, he just made that point, what do you say to that? Would investors go near your nuclear plans?
We have a moratorium on nuclear at the moment. We've got to remove the moratorium in order to get down this pathway. And the truth is, this can deliver and is modelled to deliver a return on investment. And alongside that return on investment, we can deliver a 44% reduction in energy prices to Australians, whether they be households or small businesses or industry.
Well, I'm going to have to bring you in, because return on investment for nuclear power.
Yeah, I mean, Angus said at the very start that there shouldn't be $1 of public investment in nuclear. Now there's going to be $600 billion.
That is not right, Jim. That number is just, it's just a lie. It is a lie.
Let's help out the audience here, because we've got two very large figures. There's a range in one set of figures.
He won't say what the number is.
Between 300 and 600 billion. All right, well,
the reason he won't say what the number is because he won't come clean.
It's 7 generators at under 20 billion each. So that's about $120 billion according to CSIRO costings.
It's rubbish. The reason why he won't say how much his reactors cost. Yeah, the reason he won't say how much his reactors cost is because he won't come clean on what it means for Medicare and pensions and payments and housing when they make the cuts to pay for it. $600 billion, Smart Energy Council number based on the CSIRO and the energy market operator. In the UK, they're building one reactor for $87 billion. But Angus thinks that he can build one for less than $20 billion. It's complete rubbish. And you know it's rubbish because they had to come up with a dodgy gas plan to distract from their dodgy nuclear plan. They hardly ever talk about it. And that's because Australians need to know that the only way he can find his $600 billion for these nuclear reactors is to come after Medicare again, just like they did when Peter Dutton was the health minister.
Can I just say that is absolute nonsense. The numbers are in line with the CSIRO estimates of under $20 billion for a 2-gigawatt generator. And can I finish by saying,
let me just come in on one point there. I think you'll accept that the global experience shows an enormous range in the completion of nuclear reactors. There's no one figure under 20 billion.
And we've taken that into account in looking at these numbers, as did the CSIRO. And here's the crucial point. Labor has no credibility on energy. They promised an energy price reduction before the last election. Australians have seen nothing like it. And Jim is telling lies, we just heard them, about the cost of our plan, which is 44% lower than Labor's.
Because it generates less energy in a smaller economy.
He ignores the fact
it
there will be a
less
return on...
energy in a smaller economy.
If I may finish.
Yes, let's go one at a time, because this is a difficult one.
One at a time, Jim.
Help the audience, help the audience.
Dramatically smaller economy.
And these investments will deliver a return to shareholders. That's how they've been modelled by independent modelling, Sarah. And we're confident in modelling that was done by one of the eminent energy modellers in Australia.
I think we won't win an argument on the modelling versus modelling because it's too complicated to thrash out. We're very close to time. Very briefly, from you, Angus Taylor, first of all, why are you better equipped to deal with the consequences of a world in turmoil than Jim Chalmers?
Well, we're facing deeply uncertain economic times, and a real question for Australians right now is who do you trust to manage the economy? I've had 25 years of experience before coming into politics in business and economics, and that was all about growing businesses, growing parts of the economy. That's what I want to do. I am passionate about getting this country back on track, growing our economy and growing opportunities for young Australians to buy a home, to get into a small business and to get ahead. That's what I believe in, and that's the reason why I would like to be Treasurer of this nation.
Can you do that in half the time, please?
Well, these are uncertain times, and we've made a lot of progress together as Australians, and Labor has an economic plan to make the most of that. And this would be the worst possible time to take a big risk on a reckless coalition of cuts and chaos, which would make Australians worse off and take Australia backwards. One of the big differences here is Angus Taylor and Peter Dutton. They see the policies and politics of the United States. They want to replicate them. We want to reject them. We've got our own Australian way of succeeding in uncertain times. His slogan shouldn't be recycled from John Howard 20 years ago. His slogan should be make wages low again, make taxes high again, make budgets rorted again. They see what's happening in the US and they want to replicate it. We reject those policies and those politics. We've got our own Australian way to succeed. We've got a plan. We've made progress together with Australians. And the best way to continue that progress in uncertain times is to return the government.
Jim Chalmers, Angus Taylor, thank you very much for sharing your passion with our audience tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.